Good morning. Welcome to the Kingsport News Hour for the 26th day of the 11th month in the 16th year of Changi. And today, of course, Wednesday. And so we take a step back and we look at the teachings of our true father, true parent, Sam Myung Moon, because that is the context within which we look at all the events going on in the world. And so I want to go to where we left off last time. And I noticed that we're on actually, last time we left off on slide 183 out of 563. So just short of 1/3 of the way through the whole slide presentation. So that means that we should finish shortly before God's Day, it looks like. Anyway, so I wanted to go over this slide number 183. I'm sorry, we're at 183 out of 563. Is that what I said? This is the slide we finished off on last time, but let's go through it a little more slowly. Kind of did a little bit of a hurried job last time. Get rid of this. I think probably you see a black ribbon there, and let me get rid of that. Okay. Determining original creation value. This is, I think, a pretty critical slide, so that's what I'm doing. Well, a little more slowly. The original creation value of an entity is determined by the relative reciprocal relationship. Let me see if I can maybe get this a little bit larger for you. Okay. Relative reciprocal relationship between A, the purpose of the entity as an object according to the ideal of God's creation, and B, the desire of a human subject to pursue its original creation value when relating to the entity. Now here, we're talking about this is the original creation value. So I think it goes without saying that we're talking about an original human being, an original human subject, not a fallen human subject. And this chart does not work if the human subject if the human being here is a fallen human being. And this is why in Romans, Paul says that the creation groans and travail because the creation cannot realize its original creation value without the true sons and daughters of God appearing in the world. And this is also why, then, with the appearance of Father, the appearance of Father in the world, that the creation is overjoyed. Anything that Father used, then any object with which Father had a reciprocal relationship, whether it was chopsticks or a cup or a napkin or an automobile or an airplane or anything else, that finally was accomplishing its original creation value, because there's purpose of existence according to of the object and the desire to seek value in that object. So it's centering on God's creation ideal, and then this is the original creation value. Hence, for an object to realize its original creation value, it must become one in union with a human subject. Let's go ahead and infer the word original here with an original human subject partner through give and receive action, thereby establishing an original four-position foundation in which it becomes God's third object partner. So here, creation can have a relationship with God in this way only through this kind of a give and receive action, this kind of four-position foundation, where an original human in the subject position has a give and receive action with the object in question, which is in an object position, and then through that union, then God is able to relate directly then with that object through that union. All right, let's continue, and then I guess it's a little bit too big. Okay, it's probably right there. The standard for original creation value. And since the center of the four-position foundation is God, who is absolute, God himself sets the standard of its value. Since God is absolute and the original creation value of an object is determined in relation to God, the original creation of value of that object is also absolute. But it's absolute. But what we see though is that Satan took everything away from God. And in a similar way, as long as Father was using the palace in Chongpyeong, Korea, then that palace had absolute value. But that palace was taken away, and now it no longer has a relationship with father or his successor, and so now it has lost that value, and now it has no value at all in the eyes of God. So the standard of value is absolute, unique, unchanging, and eternal. And human beings, maybe can be a sovereign or leader, intellectual or conscious person. Yeah, I think okay, the person here is down here. We have a little bit of a problem with fonts on this. Let's see. And your father gives some examples here of Cheongmongju. Cheongmongju was so in the history of Korea, there were a number of dynasties, and the final dynasty that lasted into the early 20th century was the Yi dynasty or the Chosun dynasty. And the one before that was the Goryeo dynasty. But the Goryeo dynasty became corrupt, and so it was eventually overthrown by the man who founded the Chosun dynasty. You can think of it either as the Chosun dynasty or the Yi dynasty. And in the process of it of changing from Goryeo to Chosun dynasties, Cheongmongju was a patriot in the Goryeo dynasties. He was a patriot in the outgoing dynasty, but he refused to submit himself to the new dynasty, and so he was treated then as a traitor in the Chosun dynasty. So that we see here that this is not a standard. So he is not a patriot according to an absolute standard. He was only a patriot according to a relative standard in terms of in the context of the Goryeo dynasty, but not in terms of the Chosun dynasty. And something similar here is the Yi Sun-shin. In Korea, Yi Sun-shin was an admiral who made a name for himself in the naval battles against the Japanese invaders in the late 16th century. He invented a new type of boat that, it was called a turtle boat because it had a shell like a turtle, and it could withstand the arrows. And it was metal, and so it would also withstand the fire attempts by Japanese to burn it. And so he was a patriot. He won many battles for Korea, and he's celebrated even today as a patriot. Of course, from Japan's point of view, as an enemy. Ito Hirobumi, the first governor general of the Korean Peninsula, after Japan sort of took claim in 1905 and took over Korea's foreign affairs and diplomatic relations, and essentially it did not annex Korea until 1910, but already in 1905, Japan was basically in charge of Korea, and Ito Hirobumi was the first governor general. In Japan, he's a patriot because during the modernization period of the late 19th century, he helped to write the Constitution, which was the first time that Japan had ever had a constitution, and he became the first prime minister of Japan under that new constitution. And he did many things to bring Japan up to the level of the West in terms of its politics. But in Korea, though, he was reviled as an enemy, and he was finally assassinated by a Korean patriot, and that's how he ended. That's how his life ended there. So, of course, we could give American examples, of, for example, Benedict Arnold, I suppose, who I think maybe, of course, in America, his name is synonymous with traitor because he attempted to sell West Point to the British during the Revolutionary War. He he'd done a lot of good things for the American cause earlier on, but he became convinced that America was not going to win the Revolutionary War anyway. And so he decided that he would like to go with the winning side, in other words, the British side. Of course, he was wrong, and also he was exposed as trying to sell West Point to the British, which would have been pretty damaging to the American cause, because the Hudson River at that time was an important military uh, strategic strategic objective. And there are many, I'm sure other countries have their own examples of this. And so so these are examples of how human beings, or at least in history, that we see in history, are not absolutely unique, are unique on changing in eternal values. So this the standard of original creation value is God, and it is the true parent. So for a human being to have absolute creation value, we must be really welcomed in any circumstance. And this is why Father says that with true love, you can go anywhere. And he puts it in terms of the directions of the compass. He says you can go north, south, east, or west, and you can go anywhere. Uh, have you ever been in a neighborhood where you felt a little bit uncomfortable, like you were out of place? Right? A little bit uncomfortable, like you were out of place? Well, that's because you don't have true love. You don't have true love. I've experienced that, and I suspect many of you have as well. And the value of a human being in the original creation. We're talking about now completed human beings, right? Completed human beings have divine value, eternal value, unique and irreplaceable value, and cosmic value. Unique and irreplaceable, and that is why abortion is against God's will, because that particular human being, that particular that particular DNA combination there is not ever going to be repeated. And emotion, intellect, will, and beauty, truth, and goodness in the original creation. Okay. So here again we have, okay, wait. So God has a emotion, intellect, emotion, and will, and then these are projected into the human being in our mind. Where in the human mind, there's also intellect, emotion, and will. And then in the give and receive relationship between mind and body, intellect becomes the background for truth, emotion becomes the background for beauty, and will becomes the background for goodness. And then this is how value is created by human beings. The human mind has three faculties: intellect, emotion, and will. The human body is substantially sensitive to the human mind, that is, to human intellect, emotion, and will. As such, the actions, let's shorten this sentence. Okay. As such, the actions of the body manifest the pursuit of the values of truth, beauty, and goodness. Then love, beauty, good and evil, righteousness and unrighteousness. So love and beauty this is a subject and object relationship where love is a force. Remember, we talked about this before. Love is a force that flows from a subject to an object partner, from a subject partner to an object partner. And then beauty then is what the object partner returns to the subject partner in response to the love. And there are various types of love: there parental love, conjugal love, filial love. Okay, we're leaving out. Well, we're leaving out what? We're leaving out the brother sister love, right? And then beauty also, loyalty, parental love. Then loyalty, parents are the center, and filial piety, love, attend, and serving one's parents. And fidelity, love your spouse as if he or she were your parents. In other words, the wife attends her husband as she would attend her father, and the husband attends his wife as he would attend his mother. Husband and wife must maintain absolute sex. When two entities have been divided as substantial manifestations of God's dual characteristics, They would seek to establish a four-position foundation by forming a common base. And we talked about common base before, for example. You could say that it's a language, for example, unless two people speak the same language or at least can communicate in the same language, it's difficult to have a common base. But it can be other things as well. And in our case, when we are blessed, when Father blesses us to one another, some people may say that he's blessing strangers, but no. When I was blessed with my wife, I knew her basic outlook on theology and religion, right? Because she had been educated in the principle, I had been educated in the principle. So the knowledge of the principle was a common base for us. So found by forming a common base and engaging in give and receive action. Yeah, my wife had some give and receive action. They will do this. They will do this. Let me take out the in order. Yeah, it's superfluous. To come together as a unified body, a third object to God. In this process, the emotional force that the subject gives the object is what we call love. The emotional force. So this is a definition of love here, or it's one part of the definition of love. The emotional force that the subject gives to the object is what we call love. And the emotional force that the object gives to the subject is what we call beauty. The force of love is an active force, and the response of beauty is a passive force. So if someone asks you, what is love? Can you define love for me? You can define it, yes. Love is the emotional force that a subject partner gives to its object partner. Right? And we can, starting with that, you can go on a little bit more about living for the sake of others and investing and so forth and so on. Yeah. So good and evil. Good and evil. So and any action or result of an action is good when the subject partner and an object partner fulfill the purpose of God's creation by A, giving and receiving love and beauty, to B, form a unified body, and C, become a third object to God as a result, thereby D, establishing a four-position foundation. However, an evil then is the opposite. An action or result of an action is evil when a subject and object fulfill Satan's evil purpose by forming a four-position foundation centering on Satan. So this is a little bit different from the common conception of good, isn't it? There is a common conception that something is good if it is in line with sort of the consensus of society in terms of what is good, and anything that goes against that is evil. But here we're saying that it has to be centered on the purpose of God's creation. And we're talking about giving, receiving love and beauty to form a unified body, which is the third object of God, and thereby establishing a four-position foundation. In righteousness and unrighteousness, in the process of accomplishing the purpose of goodness, the elements of daily life that are directed towards that goodness are what we call righteousness. And the process of fulfilling Satan's purpose, the elements of daily life that are directed towards that evil are what we call unrighteousness. So this is a slightly different, but different in important ways from the common conception of good and evil, righteousness and unrighteousness. Now this is section 5 of chapter 1. Creation process for God's creation and the growing period for created beings. A creation process, let's stretch this out a bit there, so I can get that up there, okay. In the Bible, Genesis 1, chapter 1, verses 1 through 31, says the verse is day 1, there's light and darkness. Science, there's the non-liquid or gas era, Azoic era. And science may have moved beyond this description here. So we need to check and make sure that we are keeping up with the most recent understanding of archaeology and anthropology. The growing period for created beings, evidence for the existence of the growing period. One, the process of creation is 6 days, so that in itself showed because God did not create the universe in just one instant. And the Bible says 6 days, which, of course, well, I know some of you may believe in a sort of a short history, but I've seen in Father's words, though, that he does give a nod to the long history, in other words, the billions of years. In any ways, I think, well, I think Father does, I think, acknowledge that it's not 6 24-hour periods. There's 6 days. It means that there's 6 periods or 6 stages, but not 24 hours. The process of the process of creation shows anyway that there is a growing period. So it was not an instant. So that's the important thing in this particular context. And number two, the human fall could not have taken place after completion. So God did not create everything complete. He created, in particular, he created human beings in an incomplete state, immature, sinless but immature. Now that's an important distinction. Some people equate immaturity with sinfulness, but no, that is not the case. Or they but God, anyway, here we see that God did. There was a fall in the beginning, although, of course, some mainline Christian theologies today disagree that there was an event at the beginning of human history. They take a different view but they also said, okay, yes, God created human beings in an incomplete state, and the sin is actually the difference between that incomplete state and the ideal of God, and that human beings through history have been sort of improving or advancing towards that ideal a little by little. I think there are many ways to rebut that, but even there, they also agree that that God created human beings in an incomplete state. When you look around at the world today, you got to acknowledge that things are not the way that you would think a God of goodness would want them to be, obviously. And so, yes, God created the world in an incomplete state. So that indicates that there is a growing period. And God's assignment of a human portion of responsibility, which is incomplete, and also biblical scripture, Genesis 1:5. Let's see what that is talking about. To Genesis 1:5 there completely. I can. Genesis 1:5, here we go. And God called the light, and the darkness he called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So there was a period from the evening to the morning, and it was this period that indicates that there is a growing period. There's a period in which things are sort of developing. Again, God did not just create immediately, and everything was the way it's supposed to be in the beginning. So the growing period in the human portion of responsibility. So the growing period are 3 stages. As we know, it's the formation, growth, and completion stages. And then, so we can go through this here. So as I just read in Genesis 1:5, there's evening. So evening going into the night then. And then all things human beings are slightly different, because all things, whether you're talking about a pine tree or a tulip, you plant the tulip bulb, and it gets the right amount of water and fertilizer, and it sprouts, and then it gets sunlight and continues to get water and air, of course, it needs, and clean air, hopefully, and hopefully the dog or the cat doesn't come around and and destroy the garden. And all things going well, then it becomes a completed and a very beautiful tulip, right? So there is no responsibility on the part of the tulip here, or even the pine tree here, or anything else. It all everything that it is supposed to become is in that seed or in that bulb, and it becomes what it is designed to become, right? Just by itself. In other words, through their principle. Okay. Now, human beings, the physical body also applies. This also applies to the human physical body. You give a child the right amount of nutrition and send them outside for some sunlight and stuff like that, and they're going to grow. You give them food and everything, they're going to grow. They're going to grow and become at least physically, completed creature. However, the character of that human being, though, is a different story, right? This is the human portion of responsibility, where we have to participate in our creation by developing our character, so that we become a complete human being that is a perfect object to God, who is the perfect subject partner, becomes the perfect object partner. And so we will see over here why there's a portion of responsibility, but right now, just to know that there is a portion of responsibility that is not automatic. It requires human participation in our own creation. And people will say, well, we are saved only by faith. Well, of course, here, this is, of course, the original design, but even in salvation, we, by the grace of God, we are saved by grace. And by that grace, God gives us the responsibility to participate in our own salvation. And there are reasons for that, because without doing that, we are no different from any other creature in God's creation. But this portion of responsibility sets us apart from anything in God's creation. Anything in God's creation. And so here, with the human portion of responsibility, there's the indirect. We are in the indirect dominion as long as we are in this formation, growth, and completion. Because God cannot interfere in this portion of responsibility without destroying His original ideal of creation. But when we become complete, then we become God's perfect object of love, object partner of love, and God is then the perfect subject partner of love, and then we have divinity. We have the values that are discussed here, back here in terms of where was? Oh yeah, here we go. The divine value. We have divine value. We have eternal value. We have unique and irreplaceable value. We have cosmic value there. When we become the perfect object partner to God's love. So here in the indirect dominion, God is able to govern by the principled results. So to put it simply, I think we can say that God, in this indirect dominion, God deals with whatever is made available to Him. He deals with whatever is made available to Him, and God will, He may have something. There may be something that is 99.99% evil. But He will pick through that, and He will take the 0.0001% good, and He will work with that. He will not have given receive action with the evil, because God is perfect good, and He cannot have given receive action with the evil. But He will take whatever small, tiny bit a little bit of good there is, and He will have given receive action with that. So so that is what I think what is meant by the realm of governance by principled results. So the principled part. Good means there's something in everyone that is principled. There's something in everyone that is principled. People are not 100% evil, ever. There is, even in the most evil person, there is a small amount of good. And God is always reaching out and to that small amount of good in any person, and is working with that small amount of good in order to grow it, to nurture it, so that that person becomes over time becomes closer to God. Satan, of course, is the opposite. Satan will take something that is 99.99% good, and he will accuse that person for the 0.01% that is evil. And he will seek to destroy that person by having given receive action with that tiny amount that is evil. That is an important difference, I think, between God and Satan. But here, I'm talking about salvation now, and that's a little bit too early to talk about that, getting ahead of myself, because here we're talking about the original creation. But it's important. It's important to realize that God is always reaching out to us, and he is always working with whatever is good within us, and we are grateful to him for that, and we praise him for that. All right, so the reason God gave him, well, here, okay, the reason God gave humans a portion of responsibility is so that human beings can qualify to be God's child. And this is important because only human beings are intended to be God's children. All right, the archangel is not intended to be God's child, and so that is why we can say the archangel does not have a portion of responsibility. Okay, archangel does not have a portion of responsibility. If he did, or if it did, if it did, then it could also become God's child, and human beings would not be unique in God's creation then. And also the portion of responsibility so that we be qualified to govern creation. Why? Because we have, when the completed human being then can say, I participated in the creation of God, in the creation process of God. Yes, I did that by taking responsibility for my own creation, the creation of my character. And of course, to have creativity, and to be participation in the process of creation. And so so this is why it said 100% completion of God's will requires God's responsibility and the human responsibility. And of course, God does much more, does most of the heavy lifting, almost all the heavy lifting. And so symbolically, we represent God's portion as 95%. It's not an exact number, but 95 to 5 is a way of sort of expressing that there's a huge differential in God's responsibility and the human responsibility, although the human responsibility of 5% actually represents 100% of our own effort. And so with that 5% responsibility, we are able to participate in the creation of our character, and that then gives us the qualification to be God's child, qualification to govern the creation, and gives us the creativity centering on God, right? Centering on God, yeah. And participation in the process of creation. Okay. Now, a lot of beautiful music has been composed until now. You can look at Mozart or Bach or Haydn or any of these other composers. You can say, wow, they really did a lot of beautiful things. And I think there was a lot of participation by Good Spirit World, a lot of inspiration from Good Spirit World in those compositions. But when human beings reach perfection or reach completion and are able to exercise creativity as the perfect object of God's love, I think there are going to be musical compositions that are far more beautiful than what we have ever had in history, and also artistic works, paintings and sculptures and architecture and everything else. And this is why we're told that the kingdom of God on earth, the kingdom of God is going to be so beautiful that a person will be able to take one brick and just spend a lifetime uh, appreciating the beauty of that one brick. It would be so beautiful. And this is why I say, they say that, oh, the rest of the most of the physical universe was created for spirit world. I don't agree with that because if you're if you're just appreciating the beauty of one brick for your entire life, why would you need that vast universe? No, it was all created for physical human beings. I believe, and I believe that 10,000 years from now, a million years from now, human beings will be occupying well, a lot more than what we're occupying now. After we eliminate original sin. Okay, I was glad to see yesterday a story where Elon Musk's trip to Mars is going to be delayed, and I think that's good. I don't think human beings are qualified to be going and colonizing other planets quite yet. We need to remain on Earth until this bug, not a computer bug, not a software bug, but in a similar way, this bug of original sin is worked out. And then once that is worked out, then we can scale up. Then we can scale up into the universe, but not until then. All right, let's go to the next slide. The reason God gave humans a portion of responsibility, because God created human beings, he has a qualification to govern them. And for human beings to gain the qualification to stand as God's children and govern all created human beings, they must create those created beings. However, human beings do not have the capacity to create those beings. And for this reason, in the place of creating all beings, God has human beings create their own character through their own portion of responsibility. By giving human beings this portion of responsibility as something they alone can do, God intends that human beings will earn the qualification to stand as God's children and govern all beings in the created world. And this includes any sort of alien beings that may or may not exist out there, right? So if these alien beings, these whatever this, with huge heads and tiny bodies or whatever, I don't know what it is, with whatever it is, if they somehow someday make it to Earth, they are part of that created world which we are supposed to be governing. They will not govern us, even if they are scientifically more advanced than us. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because remember, this archangel is the most scientifically advanced of any being in God's universe because the archangel was there and he helped and he participated in God's actual creation from the time of from not the earliest time, but much earlier than human beings, much earlier than when human beings were created. So the archangel actually has more scientific information and knowledge than we do. But that does not make him God's child. That does not make him superior to us as a being. It's not science, it's not knowledge that makes human beings superior to any other being in creation. It's not knowledge, it's not power, it's not money. It is love, and it's God's shimjon, that we are able to relate to God as God's sons and daughters. That is what makes us superior to any other being in God's creation, and that's important. Right? Now I know Father has said that these alien things are all spirit world and stuff like that, and I take him for his word on that. But he has not ruled out that there could be other things out there. Spock may be out there, but Spock, for example, is not a human being, and so he can never be Captain Kirk. he's always subservient to Captain Kirk because Captain Kirk. What am I saying? was created to be God's child, God's son. Spock was not. Okay. moving on. Getting into Star Trek here. Okay. All right, here. Okay. How is the creation of human beings accomplished? God gives human beings his word as his own portion of 95% responsibility. When human beings believe in that word and put it into practice by maintaining absolute sex and achieving self-governance, they fulfill their own portion of 5% responsibility and create and complete their own character. So there's something very important here. God gives human beings his word, okay? When human beings believe in that word and put it into practice. So we're talking here about putting it into practice requires what? A give and receive relationship between the spiritual self, the spirit self, and the physical self. The spirit self cannot put God's word into practice. You need the physical self. Whether, for example, love thy neighbor, all right? Well, it takes a physical self in order to love your neighbor. Of course, it takes the spirit self too. It takes the spirit self and the physical self working together in order to love your neighbor. Whether it is, if you bake a cake and take it over to your neighbor, all right? Well, the spirit self made you want to do it. This physical self actually did it. And then you walked it over next door to the neighbor and you gave the cake to the neighbor. So putting it into practice required the physical self. Or even sacrificing your life for your neighbor, protecting your neighbor, whatever, also required a combination of a cooperation or a give and receive action between the spirit self and the physical self. And so that is why there is no growth in the spirit world. Because the growth of the character requires a give and receive action between spirit self and physical self. And so that's why when we get to the part on resurrection later on in chapter 5, we're going to see that when people, well, actually everyone so far in history has gone to the spirit world without becoming complete. And so they need to work with people who have physical bodies so that they can take advantage of or receive the benefit of working with that physical body. So right now, as you are watching this program, your spirit self and physical self are having a give and receive relationship. And also, many people in the spirit world are with you right now, taking advantage of your physical body that is participating in this lecture series. And by that, they are also gaining of merit and being able to grow a little bit at a time. But that is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. And that is why it is important that people accomplish their growth while they're still in the physical world, because it's very difficult to do this in the spirit world. You got to establish a relationship with someone who is similar to you and all that kind of stuff, and it's very difficult to do it. And then the person who's watching will say, I don't want to, and they turn it off. Then what are you going to do? All the people in the spirit world that were watching with you are left holding the bag. I want to watch something else. I want to go to YouTube. I want to go to Netflix. My favorite program on Netflix is coming on. No. And the people in the spirit world are saying, not again. So it's difficult. It's difficult to work with people in the physical world, partly because the people in the physical world don't know what's going on. Okay, so God gives human beings his word, all right? And then human beings believe in that word and put it into practice. How? By maintaining absolute sex and achieving self-governance, they fulfill their own portion of 5% responsibility and create and complete their own character. Accordingly, human beings create their own character through their own portion of responsibility. In this way, they come to have creativity and become the second lords of creation. They participate in God's masterpiece of creation and bring it into completion. This is the reason God gave a portion of responsibility to human beings. Oops. Okay, the realm of liberation of the portion of responsibility is perfectly completed through absolute sex. Yes. When the portion of responsibility is fulfilled, when the human portion of 5% responsibility is completed, God's responsibility, 95%, is also completed at God's will, but as the purpose of God's creation is also completed. So we saw that back here in this graph here. So 100% completion of God's will requires God's responsibility plus the human responsibility. And there's a huge difference between the two. God does most of the heavy lifting, and we symbolize that sort of differential by the numbers 95 and 5, but that's only a symbolic thing. It's not actual objective empirical numbers. So, so when the human portion of responsibility is completed and Adam becomes the substantial true parent, God, who is the invisible, formless true Father, manifests and incarnates as the substantial true parent. Okay? So here you note that Adam is becoming the substantial true parent. And you may say, well, what, isn't it Adam and Eve? Well, Father said that God gave him the official title that God gave to Father. The official title that God gave to Reverend Moon is true parent, true parent. And I've talked to a number of Koreans, and even in general conversation in Korean, 참 부모 does not require the presence of both parents. The father alone can be pumo, the mother alone can be pumo. The father, in this case, a father is given the official title of a pumo, of 참 pumo, or true parent. So then section 6, now we're going to talk about spirit world, the incorporeal substantial world and the corporeal substantial world, centering on human beings. So here we're going to talk about physical world and spirit world, and both are substantial. So we think only of the physical world being substantial world, but also the spirit world is substantial as well. I want to show you actually something that I just came across. Hold on a second, let me unshare. And I want to share something with you. I thought, wow, this is really something. And a lot of times, Father will lead us to something just at the right time. And this may be one of those times. Let's take a look here. And I thought this was pretty cool because it looks like science may be on the verge of acknowledging the existence of a spirit world. Okay. This is an article on MSN.com, which is actually a very leftist site, but it's interesting. 15 reasons why death may just be an illusion. That sounds interesting, don't you think? Anyway, let's take a look at this. And let me bring this up for you. Have you ever pondered the true nature of death? What if everything we believe about mortality is just an illusion? According to Dr. Robert Lanza, death might not be the final curtain, but a gateway to realms beyond our understanding. This is exactly what Father says, right? He says that death is kind of like a second birth, and going through the process of death is like the baby in the womb coming into the physical world, going through the birth canal. And this seems to sort of align with that. Stick around to explore why some quantum physicists believe humans never die. So, wow. So quantum physicists, or at least some of them, not all of them, but some of them, looks like they're discovering spirit world finally. They're finally catching up to Father's truth. Dr. Robert Lanza's biocentrism, and I'm going to have to look this up, biocentrism, asserts that the universe is grounded in life and consciousness. This radical idea would mean that our understanding of reality is backwards. Instead of life adapting to the universe adapts to life and is determined by how we perceive it. And okay, well, let's go on here a little bit. Have you ever considered that your mind might be the ultimate artist painting reality on a canvas? Dr. Lanza believes that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, but creates it. Your brain isn't merely processing the world around you; it's actually constructing it moment by moment. And Father talks about how in the spirit world, you know, if you want to have a banquet with 1,000 people, you can just with a sort of, we're talking about the completed human being, right? For the person who is the completed object partner of God's love, can have a banquet of 1,000 people with a certain menu and everything like that, and everything will happen. Everything will happen. The people that you want will be there, and so, and he also says that you can meet the people you want to meet. And some people ask about, can I have my pet dog in the spirit world? Well, pet dogs don't have spirit selves, and so no, but Father says actually yes, you can, because you are creating that reality in the spirit world. You're creating that reality. And just like Dr. Lanza here is saying here. So, but here Lanza is talking about the physical world, but Father is talking about in the spirit world. You can actually the universe is created by perception, and that I think so. I think there seems to be a pretty strong connection between what this man is talking about in terms of his theory of biocentrism and what Father teaches in terms of what spirit world is like. So our consciousness shapes reality in many ways. For instance, people with schizophrenia hallucinate events that appear real but aren't. And when you dream, your mind fabricates illusions you believe until you wake up. Death can be similar, as our minds largely influence our reality. Okay? In propounding his theory, Lanza cited the two-slit experiment on how particles behave. And I think many of us have heard about this. Without being observed, these particles pass through both holes simultaneously. I think, probably, if you don't know what this is, look up the two-slit experiment and you'll understand. It's a pretty common thing that people talk about. But when observed, they move through them one at a time. So if our minds can influence particles in an experiment, could then also impact our perception of death. Now, look outside. The color of the sky should appear blue or black, depending on the time of day. But with genetic engineering, you can perceive colors differently. The same blue sky can be green or red after chemicals in your brain are tampered with. Another proof that your mind shapes your reality. In one of his presentations, Lanza compared death to a flat earth. That belief eventually became a reality when shaped by their perception of the universe. Lanza maintained that the flat earth ideology is no different from death, as both are products of human consciousness and perception. Aside from consciousness, time can also prove that death isn't real. Einstein once said that time is merely a figment of the mind, and quantum physics supports this idea. Time isn't a fixed linear concept, but only appears so due to our limited understanding. In the same way, death can also be a construct of our limited knowledge of the world. This is very interesting, because in the original world of creation, there is no death of the physical world, of the physical body, does not automatically mean separation. That we still are able to see and feel and touch and communicate, talk with our ancestors the same way we could when they had their physical bodies, and with Father as well, of course. In a 2002 study, quantum entanglement showed that light particles can communicate regardless of the time or distance between them. This spooky find defies our classical understanding of physics, suggesting that the world is timeless. If so, dying would be an illusion, as death cannot co-occur with a timeless reality. According to quantum physics, if a person dies, there's a chance they still exist somewhere else. Yeah, in the spirit world. Okay. This is the theory of the multiverse, where every possible outcome of a quantum event occurs in a separate universe. With this theory, a universe could exist where late loved ones are still alive and well. Imagine yourself as a quantum being existing in multiple states until observed. Death would be another state of being coexisting with life until consciousness collapses the possibility. This perspective challenges us to reconsider the nature of existence and mortality. So he goes on for a little bit more, but I think you get the idea. So there are, what is it? There are a few more slides, but you can, if you're interested, you can go in and check them out yourself. Okay. All right, let's go back to OSDP. So the point is that science appears to be making progress towards scientifically explaining the existence of the spirit world. And that, I think, is pretty important. So that, of course, would lead to explaining the existence of God as well, right? All right, so does spirit world exist? And what is my relationship with it? From the perspective of the principle of creation, the structure of the cosmos, let's talk about that. So here, God has Song Sang and Hyung Sang, and human beings, mind and body. And so also the body then exists in the corporeal substantial world, in the natural world, and the mind exists in the incorporeal substantial world, which is the spirit world. It says here spiritual world, but I think we like to do this with just the spirit world. Yeah, the spirit world, the incorporeal substantial world, or heaven. And this heaven is not the kingdom of heaven in heaven. This is, of course, although we're still talking, this is still chapter 1, so we're still talking about the original world. It's true. It says here Hebrews 8:5. Let's take a look at Hebrews 8:5. Hebrews. Here we go. Hebrews 8. Hebrews 8:5. Okay. Who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. Let's go back to let's go back one here. Actually, let's go to one. Let's back up a bit to the beginning of chapter 8. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. So here, this is the conclusion, I guess he wants to give, right? We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. So talking about Jesus, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and not man. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices, wherefore it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. Talking about Jesus here, we're just finished at verse 3. For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law. Here, okay, now we get to verse 5. Who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. Shadow of heavenly things. Yes, the physical world is the world of result, whereas the spirit world is the world of cause. And so, in that sense, physical world is the shadow of the spirit world. As Moses was admonished by God when he was about to make the tabernacle, for see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. So Moses could only make the tabernacle according to the way that he was instructed spiritually while he was on the mount. Okay, but now we're going to 6. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also is he the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. Okay, so that is Hebrew chapter 8. Okay, so then and the two together, of course, the cosmos, and there's a give and receive relationship between these two. Give and receive relationship between these two. Right? And we got 5 physical senses, of course, and we also have the corresponding 5 spiritual senses as well. Also a spiritual sense of sight and of hearing and of smell and of touch. And what am I missing here? Taste, yes, of taste. And so 5 spiritual senses as well, which if the fall had not occurred, we would all possess currently. But because of the fall, the spirit world and physical world became separated. Because why? Because they're only united in the person of a completed human being. So without that completed human being, when Adam uh, threw that away, when he threw away the possibility for him to become a completed human being, he also threw away the possibility for the spirit world and the physical world to be completely one. And so that is what happened with that. And so here the spirit body, the physical body, and as I think I mentioned before, the spirit body is the fruit of the tree of the physical body. It's the fruit, and so to be fruitful, that's why we say to be in the blessing, where God says to be fruitful, that means to create the fruit of the physical body. All right, we're going to have to go back over this. We're out of time, so we're going to have to come back to this slide next week, which we will. Next week is the 21st, so yes, no problem in doing this next week. All right, so in the meantime, God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.